What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Course Café. I'm Raymond, the style editor over at Skratch and the talking head behind golf projects. We're going to change it up a little bit with this episode. We're going to introduce at the top swing thoughts, but first I got to sit down with Chris Knott, the chief merchandising officer at johnnie-O and the guy who actually founded Peter Millar. His story is insane. He got into menswear around 14, grew up in a small town in North Carolina. He also is former Burberry, which is kind of wild. But again, this guy has been in menswear for a minute now, one of the OGs, an absolute gangster when it comes to clothing. We talk about taste and storytelling, product design, and what it takes to build a brand that lives beyond the course. He's now with johnnie-O, a brand that's probably not on your radar, that we definitely all should be paying attention to. The brand has absolutely exploded since he's joined on a few years back, and some of the stuff that they're doing on and off course is actually really, really interesting. But before we jump into all that, let's get into this week's swing thoughts. 3 things on my radar. First up, Manners just announced a collab with Reebok called No Thanks, I'll Walk. This one's interesting for 2 reasons. It's Manners' first major collab since their rebrand, and 2, they're bringing that like refined sportswear lens to Reebok's heritage silhouettes from a footwear perspective. I've always said that Manners is one of the few brands that really gets how to reinterpret traditional golf styles without losing its identity. Early shots of the footwear reflect that perfectly. If you want a deeper dive in how they approach this, go check out my latest conversation with Luke, the actual co-founder and creative director from Manners. Second is Malbon Golf and Gap. Not surprising, Steven is one of the most connected guys in the game, and they're on an absolute wild launch schedule. The Gap collab just shows how Malbon can stay in that culture current. The only thing I'm watching for, will Jason Day ever debut a collab like this on course? My guess, probably not. Tour moments are usually reserved for paid sponsorships, but also JD's been around for a minute, so the big motivator here isn't money, but never say never. Last up, the golf footwear scene right now is chaos in the best way. New silhouettes, bold collabs, wild colorways. It's loud, it's attention grabbing, and I think it's good for the game. Golf's been stuck in neutral for a really long time. This moment reminds me of actually what's happening in hoops right now too. You've got Anthony Edwards with Adidas, Tyrese Halliburton with Puma, and Salehi Bembury just dropping his signature shoe with Halliburton in the NBA Finals, which is wild. The wave of participation, golf's catching it, and like I said, I'm here for all of it. That's this week's Swing Thoughts. Hope you like the new segment, just to keep you updated with some things that are on my mind that I've been thinking about. But let's get into it. This is my conversation with Chris Knott, the Chief Merchandising Officer over at johnnie-O. Well, sweet. So I think we had mentioned it, but born and raised in North Carolina, like you've had a fascinating journey. Again, mentioned that too. But I think our first real connection between the two of us, I specifically started in menswear when I actually started working at Macy's. At the end of my college football career, needed something to do, was always really interested in menswear. And that was the only place that actually like accepted my application. So
Right.
That's where I got my start. And I read that you had gotten your first start when you were 14 working at a local retail spot. For me at Macy's, I think one of the things that I like vividly remember is just the relationship with the clothing, but then also the people too. Is there any like core memories, if we go back to that 14-year-old you, that you felt like really throttled you into the interest of where you are now?
No, that's a great question. I mean, I think most people you meet in the clothing business that really love it have worked some retail at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think to be really good at retail, you got to like people, generally like people. I think for me, growing up in a small town and working at the nicest men's store, I kind of got to meet all the business people in town, whether it's the husbands, the wives, whatever. And, and I didn't, I grew up more on the farming side. So to be able to sit with the guys that ran the banks and sell them suits and sport coats and neckties. And, back then everybody, dressed up to go to work. You wore tailored clothing to go to church,
Mm-hmm.
So like I remember when I was like 15 years old, one Saturday I sold 14 suits, and that was just me in the store. They probably sold 35 or 40 that day. But like today, if you did that, that would be like a record.
Yeah.
Probably may not sell 35 suits in a week. So for me, that was, I really had I was working for a third generational men's store, and it's still there. And
Mm.
it's funny, the guy that was my boss, who was like 5 years older than me, the grandson, his daughter now works for us at johnnie-O and helps
Oh,
run
that's
retail,
crazy.
which just shows you full circle, and she's great. But I think growing up in a small town like that, working in a specialty store, we call it, like you had to unpack the boxes, you had to mark the goods, you had to get them on the shelf, you had to sell them, you had to pin the alterations. I mean, you did the whole thing, and then the sales reps back then would come around and you'd work in the store because you had enough people on the floor to cover the floor. So I got around a lot of presentations at a young
Mm.
age for these salespeople that were riding around selling clothes throughout the Southeast for these manufacturers.
Hmm. No, that's awesome. And I think, yeah, to that point, like when I worked in the big box retailer, that was the first time I got hands on and just like understood the process. And two, I think secondarily, people skills is like you mentioned really important. You're developing these relationships through Q&A sessions, especially when you're talking about tailoring and going through the alterations process. That was always really unique. And again, I think the relationships that came out of it, but the conversations are something that I'll always remember. And I think for me, that was what sparked my interest, just getting a gauge on what people were looking for, both on like a high end level, but then too, when people were just coming into the store looking to just dress better,
Yeah.
and also
That's
explore like their interests.
so many people today, especially men, they don't really know. They're scared of buying clothes. Like if you worked in a store or in a pro shop or something, you've been around it, you're more comfortable with it. But the average guy is a little bit nervous about buying clothes. They don't really know, and I think 40% of our online purchases are by the wives or the girlfriends.
Hmm. Interesting.
So, but I always enjoy helping people get what they want. So when we build a line here, I kind of think about, hey, what do my salespeople need? What does my internet buyers need here at the
Mm.
company? I think about all that stuff as we build the line, and then because if you think about it, somebody in Florida needs something totally different outside of Portland, right?
Yep.
And comfort zones, and so you can't just design thinking like where you live, where it just gets real
Hmm.
hot in summer. Well, you'd be in Long Island in June, and you need to be wearing a piece of outerwear, to play golf, or even
Hmm.
go to dinner. So, I think understanding that helps, when you're on my side of it now.
100%. Yeah. And I think like I always had a sales goal. That was something that kind of bothered me because I feel like it took away from building a relationship with the customers that were coming in to shop.
Yeah,
Because like you said, they would come in and ask for a certain item or a category. But if you sit down and have a Q&A session with them, real brief, you get a better understanding of where they're going to be, what they actually need. And that actually at the tail end of things had larger like sales orders because they were buying things that they didn't know they needed. Because to
that's
your
right.
point, there was a lack of education there. And again, if you don't know what you don't know, you're stuck in this like weird loop or whatnot.
Yeah,
Um,
I always
and
say
then, and
like
then,
you got to become the expert. Like if you can show them that you know what you're talking about, it goes a lot better once they trust you.
Mhm. And so your trips to New York, you had mentioned a few times in your past with your mentor Steve Ashworth. When you
Yes.
were taking those trips, was that when you were still a teenager, or had you gone
Yes.
to college at that point? So it was still the same
Well,
age.
so I always say I got to look under the hood at a young age in a business, but like basically what we would do is, that his dad and granddad, they weren't going to like pay for me to go to New York. So we would say, hey, we'll just sleep on the couch of somebody's, like we wouldn't get an extra hotel room. We stay in a sales rep's room, or,
Mm.
we were very, we would eat all the free lunches in the showrooms. But like once you, like as a kid, go to New York, and, in this one building, the 1290 building had about 200 manufacturers in the one building. You could spend a week there just working, lines. It was really a neat experience back then, and that kind of gave me the bug a little bit, getting to see that early. So when I
Mhm.
went off to college, working retail was the only option, which I loved, and I worked retail all through college. But I kind of knew I wanted to be a sales rep because I saw those guys coming around.
Mhm.
They worked really hard 3 or 4 months. They had a couple months off, then they kind of the cycle started all over. But they seemed to play a lot of golf and they seemed to be living pretty good. So I was like,
Mm.
I was very happy just to be a sales rep because that's a good life because you got a lot of freedom. And then after doing that for 15 years or so, I realized you're only as good as the lines you're selling, and
Mm-hmm.
you can be the greatest sales rep in the world. But if all of a sudden they don't need salesmen anymore, or they're going to go direct to their own stores, while you're out of a job. So that's when I started my own company back in 2001.
Mm-hmm. So how did you develop your taste in that period? Like, was there any brands or styles or textures that like really
Yeah.
stood out to you early in those years?
It's kind of funny. I just got a text from him yesterday, but there was when I was growing up, there was a local guy from Chapel Hill named Alexander Julian, and he was a big deal. Like, I mean, he won the Cody Award, and he's a good friend of mine. We're in a men's club thing together now, and but he was really cutting edge back then, in men's fashion, and it was high end. So I remember going to a store in Raleigh called the Hub and paying like $75 for a knit shirt when
Ooh.
I was like 16 years old. Like that was a big deal. So, but I just wanted one great one. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want we were selling $29 knit shirts in our store. So I would say, and we've talked about it, like he was like a big influence, because he was local and he did a lot with color. Like he
Mm-hmm.
would take a very basic, Glen plaid and drop a purple window pane or pink window pane in there. And I think a lot of people kind of followed him later in life the way they design clothes by taking traditional kind of pattern work and
Mm-hmm.
putting a little bit of color in it, and making it still wearable. And we do that.
Interesting.
We do that today here. Like, and it's funny. I exchanged texts with him yesterday, and he's still out there doing it.
Yeah. Was there anything that you like fell in love with pretty early that you still kind of reach for in these years in life?
Oh man, like I remember getting my first alligator belt. That was a big deal.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
in the store I worked at, had a store like back then. They like if you didn't sell the stuff at regular price, you'd have a sale for like 2 weeks, and you just put it upstairs and bring it back out for the next year
Mm-hmm.
because now everybody blows it out and you start all over. But I remember finding a Textan alligator belt up there that was kind of this olivey brown color that the owner of the store gave me, and I think I wore that thing out. I wish I still had it, but I think I passed it on to someone with a smaller
Yeah.
waist.
That's hilarious. That's awesome.
Yeah. But
Um,
back then too, like Cole Haan shoes were the Bragano shoes were a big deal because they were all the shoes made in Italy, and they were like $250 back then, 30,
mhm.
30 years ago or 40 years ago. So it was kind of like having a pair of those was a big deal back then.
Mhm. And then from like a learning perspective, just because back in those times the internet wasn't as prominent as today, like how are you digesting and learning throughout that process? Was it just a lot of hands-on and a lot of those trips back and forth from New York and obviously like around Raleigh, there's like you had mentioned some pretty spot
Yeah.
on
I
places.
mean, back then, and like not to feel like 1,000 years old, but because people had to wear suits and sport coats and things to work and church and things like that,
Mhm.
the like you may have 5 or 6 men's clothing stores in one town with 200,000 people back then, and
Yep.
they just sold different stuff because you're really kind of like in the uniform business.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know what to compare that to now because that was just the way it was back then. So to kind of get into that world and like we had our own tailor shop in our store. So if you came in and bought a pair of pants, like, if you could wait 10 minutes, Betty in the back would hem them for you. So, you think about that today, if you could do that, what a unique thing it would be. So you kind of did it back then on, service and product and, and like in every town you'd have like a good, better, best store. You know,
Yep.
you if you're in a big enough town, there was somebody selling $1,000 suits and there were somebody selling 600 and there's guys selling 300. So we were more in the middle where I grew up. So the reason I bring that up is I created a sense for value in
Mm.
product. Like it's really easy to go make expensive stuff and put in your line because anybody can do that because the mills develop it all and But
Yep.
like what we do here is we make really great stuff that we design from the yarn up. And when you get it, it's not really expensive. It's not inexpensive, but I would say it's considered very, middle of the road price points. But the value of it, you can't make it any better. And I think,
Hmm.
knock on wood, my career has been successful because I've always understood value. And not and value can be, a cashmere coat that's $1,000, but from everybody else is 3,000. It doesn't have to necessarily be inexpensive.
Hmm.
I like to over deliver, and I
Hmm.
think value always wins. In anything,
No,
restaurants, cars, whatever.
100%. Which it's interesting because after college you're at Burberry, and like in that environment, did that teach you about presentation and craft? Like, was there anything specific in that like area of time that helped you develop like even a skill set, an eye for that type of stuff?
Yeah, 100%. Like when I moved to New York right out of college, all the merchandising was done in the same office that the sales are. And we do the same thing right here in Raleigh now. I'm looking at my merchandising department, and right beside me, the showroom where we sell it. So to me, everything being in the same room is very helpful because you're looking at all the, you know, piece goods and everything coming through, and then 6 months later they're hanging in your showroom. So that was
Mm.
very helpful. The Burberry experience, what was great for me there, and I repped for them for like 11 or 12 years. That's a true global brand. If you look in this business, there's a lot of great labels out there. Like
Yep.
johnnie-O is a brand. People know the brand. There's a great, in the men's industry, there's a lot of labels that are more like industry labels, and people know it in the industry. But like if you said it to someone on the street, they wouldn't know it.
Hmm.
Burberry was a brand, and when I went out on the road to sell it, that's how I sold it. I just walk into a men's store that never heard of it or didn't carry it, and I'll be like, everybody walks in your doors heard of Burberry. They either got some cologne, they got a umbrella, they got a scarf, they got a top coat. And then I ended up selling them suits, shirts, and ties made by Burberry. And
Hmm.
I was rolling in that deal because I really built it. But Burberry was one of those examples. They decided they didn't want to sell all the men's stores I was selling to,
Mm.
which were they're all still in business. They wanted to only sell to the big bucks, fancy or department stores like Neiman's and whatnot. And
Yep.
the men's specialty stores are still standing, and some of those other stores have been sold and gone through their gyrations, just, as things have changed. And that's
Hmm.
when I knew I needed to start my own company because I was like, hey, I'm the number one and number two sales rep in this company. And I could walk in tomorrow and not have a job with,
Yeah.
because somebody in London decided they didn't want to sell at my store in Memphis anymore. So
Hmm.
that's what forced me to start my own company.
Which goes back to like your point on being a merchant at heart. I think you had mentioned, but when you founded Peter Millar, especially in those early years, like you were also a designer too. Like what inspired you? Like where was your head at creatively in that specific moment in time?
Yeah, really what I was was I was a sales guy first, and then I was a merchandiser. And then I'll tell you the difference. Like a designer is like somebody that probably sits there and sketches and draws, and they can really they usually can express it on paper. Like I can't draw a stick man. I'm terrible.
Okay.
But I can sit in a room full of fabrics and and merchandise a line where I know I want to put this in a quarter zip or crew neck, and
Mm,
I can, we call it paper dolling, but I could always go to a factory and sit there and look at what they're doing and leave with what I wanted, and
mm,
that's kind of if you said, hey, what's your magic sauce? Like I never had a problem figuring that out. Like that comes
mm.
natural to me. And, and that's, I don't ever like sit there and go, what's going to be in the line? I know what needs to be in it. We just got to go do the work to get it in there.
Do you think that comes from 14-year-old you being
Yeah.
so hands-on and like very much in the weeds in the alteration process?
I think so. I think seeing people say no,
Yep.
and yes, all those years, I do think, that's why we like to hire people here with experience because, you need to get, your nose bloodied up sometimes, you can't learn it all in school, obviously,
Mhm.
where you go to school. You need hands-on experience. And we used to have these professional sales records. Back then, they were records, not even CDs, of a retailer up in Baltimore named Lou Moses that put out these sales records about how to sell men's clothing. And we would listen to them because we were into it. But it also made us a much better salesperson, right?
Yep.
So, like, hey, when you bring out 3 ties, you bring a stripe, a foulard, and a print. You always start at the top. You always have lollipops for the kids. All these little sales tricks that when you start getting that stuff down when you're at a young age, everything else, you're not still trying to learn that when you're 25. You learned it when you're 14, right?
Mm-hmm.
That still goes to what we do here every day. Anybody, because we're kind of always selling, even internally. Here's why we need this in the line. You got to sometimes paint a picture of how they're going to wear it.
Yep.
Like this is what we're missing. We got all these great sport cuts, but we don't have the perfect, solid woven with the right collar to wear under. We got to put this in the line for that reason.
And to that point, are you like designing and selling towards a certain archetype, like a certain person in mind? Or is it more of just like general tactics?
I think you've got to define your customer, right? We know we kind of know who our just say guy is. It's harder for ladies because women shop way more brands than men. But
Mm-hmm.
I always say, to run the race, you got to know where the finish line is, right? And we
Yep.
do know that. Like we know who we're going after. And if you don't, this job's very hard. You kind of know your demographic and you know who that is. And then, like we sell a lot of golf shirts, but a lot of people, they don't play golf. They just want an easy care shirt they can wear. They may be a dentist, but they don't have to
Mm-hmm.
laundry the shirts, take them to the dry cleaners. They don't wrinkle when you take them out of the washer and dryer. So there's a lot to these performance fabrics out there that are way more than just being cool in hot weather.
Yep. And so when you finally did decide to step away from Peter Millar, did you have a non-compete in place?
Yeah, when we sold the company in 2012 to Rijmont, it was a great transaction for both sides,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a 4-year employment contract. So 2.5 years into it, I realized they probably don't need me anymore, and I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I knew I just felt like I use the term it outgrew me, but I just knew that they didn't need me there anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
when I left, there was a year and a half left on my non-compete
Mm.
that they could have just said, "Hey, we're not going to enforce it," but they did, which was probably smart. But they had to pay me not to work. So I actually, which I'd have gotten like 5 years of that, but only got a year and a
Yeah.
half. But so but it was really good because I'd been running and gunning since 2001, traveling around the world, going to every trade show. I mean, it was crazy,
Mm-hmm.
schedule, busy, busy, busy. So I had a year and a half to kind of, you know, do some other stuff, which was good. And but I was ready to go back to work. And johnnie-O, which is funny, the way we met each other was we made a run at buying johnnie-O when I was still a part owner at Peter Millar, a partner at Peter
Interesting.
Millar. So that was back in the day when all the logo things were really rocking and rolling, like, wow, this brand gets so big so fast. And da, 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
So johnnie-O was still kind of small, but we loved the logo, everybody in our company. And that's where I met John O'Donnell. So then once I kind of retired or whatever I did there, left, they called me and I was like, man, I love the brand, but I'm on the sidelines for a year and a half. I can't do anything now. So I just waited till that was up. And then, 15 days later, I joined them.
That
Turned out great.
that that's interesting because I had a follow-up question to that. Like you probably felt like a free agent that was just like
Yeah,
itching to understand what was happening in the industry and who was interested. Like, did you just get a ton of phone calls around
I
either
did.
specific favors or like heat checks or
Yeah,
anything?
it was great. Yeah, because what had happened at Peter Millar, and it wasn't just me, we had a team of great people that are still there that, we built it together. I mean, it was kind of a phenom, right then, because this brand like came out of nowhere. And
Mm-hmm.
it really, I'm not going to mention, but it put a few brands out of business really because you could buy it all under one label,
Mm.
and so, yeah, I got a lot of calls because I knew a lot of people in the industry, and I went and met with all kinds of people and entertained what I want to do. But I'd kind of gotten into this lifestyle. Like I'm sitting here wearing a hoodie today. I came from the real dressy, dress up world, wear a coat and tie every day. I knew I didn't want to go back into that because I saw it shrinking, and but the thing about johnnie-O was like, hey, you got to go compete against your old company now and they're really good at what they do. So we purposely try not to be like them, like, I mean, yeah, we make golf shirts and woven, so does everybody, but we don't get too caught up on what they're doing because they're a great company and nobody's unhappy with them. They love that brand. So we had to carve out our own niche. And that to me was harder than the first time I did it, starting my own company, because now I am competing against, brands like Blue that are doing great. So to me, if somebody asks me what I'm really proud of, being able to help johnnie-O, grow into this amazing brand with, just from a merchandising standpoint, we got all the wonderful people around that do all the hard stuff. To me, that's been harder to do, because there is more competition. When we started, or I started Peter Millar, you're competing against golf brands. You weren't in the golf space. I mean, there wasn't Peter Millar and a Grayson and Holderness and all these great brands out there now. So it's a little bit harder now. But I'm really proud of what we've done here. It's been great.
Yeah, you were like the quarterback that ends up on a new team, and then all of a sudden you're in the defensive scouting report for the team that you used to play for, trying to give them all the points and interest. And that's funny.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, after.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just saying, but we really kind of do our own thing here. I think that you can get too caught up in what other people are doing.
Exactly.
And we don't have our head in the sand, but like, a lot of these sales reps, whatever meeting they were in last, somebody said was great, but we listen to all that and we take it in and then we go, okay, we got you here. We know we got to address that, but we're going to do it this way because everything we do, we want it to be like our own way, have our own top spin on it.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything in that non-compete timeline, like hobbies or any new rituals or anything that you picked up that kind of just stuck?
I did start doing a lot of inshore fishing. I don't do inshore fishing, and I ended up getting a little hooked on that. But then once I went back to work and I realized I'd have all this free time to fish, I hadn't played fish in a couple of years now. So I played a lot of golf because I'm a golfer. Because you did have free time. I dabble in rental properties, so I did 2 or 3 rental projects, which turned out to be great because for the markets went crazy in North Carolina. So my time spent on that non-compete was pretty. I mean, I was busy doing stuff, and it was great. I would say that at 48 or 49 years old, it was a pretty nice little thing to have,
Yeah. Were you still going to like?
I was ready to get back to the business because you get burnt out a little bit,
I was gonna say like it feels like an extended summer where it's like, okay, I feel like my routine has been set for the last 15, 20 years. I'm ready to like get back into action. Were you still going to like menswear shows and stuff like that?
Well, I really didn't want during my non-compete just because I didn't want to, because I didn't know what I was going to do, right? So, I still, I'm always taking pictures of product and, online, screenshotting stuff I like, Pinterest and all that stuff. But you never really stop doing that. But I kind of put it down for a while because I've been doing it since I was 14.
Yep.
And what you realize is a lot of your friends are in the business. So I've got a wedding picture at my house, and I had like 75 people at my wedding, and about 30 of them were retailers because that's
Yep.
But you miss the friendships because all of a sudden you're not talking every day, and you're not doing all that stuff that you do when you're when you have a relationship going with a business relationship.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, when John called, was he immediately pitching you, or is he just trying to get like a heat check on where your head was at?
John is great, and I wish we worked even more closely. I see him; he's still on the West Coast. I wasn't going to move out there, but I love going out there. And what really happens is wherever the product is where everybody ends up coming to the meetings because it's all about product, right? So where we were here, starting out in a little 600 square foot office, now we're in 8,000 square feet. But John was great. I mean, if you ever get to meet him, he's like, I don't know anybody like him. He's just a really special guy. And I love being around him. And, he was not pushy, just one of their board members, who I'm on the board now with, who's a great, a guy named Peter Bonaparte is a great industry guy. He's a lawyer and a, veteran in the clothing business, ran like Nine West and Jones in New York and all this stuff.
Mm.
He lives in New York, but he played soccer at UNC, and he
Okay.
knew one of my buddies at where I play my golf. And I think between John knowing me from when we tried to buy the company and Peter being on the board, they kind of got together and made a little pitch. And I was like, you know, I really love the brand. I mean, like this is
Mm-hmm.
maybe right in my alley, and it turned out to be the perfect fit. But this is a great story. So I was in a grocery store down in West Palm, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, and here comes this like 75-year-old guy, horn rim glasses and Alden shoes, and wearing a johnnie-O shirt, and I thought if that guy's wearing it, then I'm
It's a
in.
sign.
Because I saw it as a generational brand. You know what I mean? It
Yep.
was not just a frat boy brand. And I think to me, that was like an aha moment. I'll never forget it. And I thought, wow, there's a guy wearing that. And really, all they needed for me, they had a great brand and it was a great mark. They just needed some help with the merchandise, really. But with people like me in the industry our whole life, you know a lot of customers, you know a lot of factories, you've never really done anybody wrong, so everybody's willing to help you, and some of my old relationships are still, I carried them right on, whether it's retailers, factories, all that stuff, we're all still
Mm-hmm.
together, which is great.
Yeah. It goes back to, again, keep referencing it, but like 14-year-old you understanding the importance of people and like relationships, especially in the alteration space when people are getting stuff custom to them. They need a level of trust there that isn't just an exchange between an associate that's sitting behind a desk.
Yeah. We've got fit specialists here. I'm looking at two of them right now that are trained to, put the tape on it, but we're still involved, like, trying it on, making sure, like, you can put a spec, a tech pack on a piece of paper, but it's flat, right? Clothes
Mm-hmm.
are three-dimensional. So me and my other partner here, Marcus, we work hand in hand with our technical designers like every day on how things fit and how collars lay. So everything I'm wearing is johnnie-O right now. My underwear, socks, shoes, pants, knit, hoodie. So, and like by wearing it every day, you find the little things that may need tweaking,
Mm-hmm.
and you can fix them.
Yep.
That's important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And because men are peculiar, like the pockets aren't deep enough or the bottoms are too big or, the belt loops aren't spaced right, all that stuff. We pay
Mm-hmm.
attention.
No, it's a consistent refining process. So when you eventually joined the johnnie-O team, what were those first 2 weeks like? Was there anything that
Well,
like stood out or surprised you?
it's funny. When I joined in that October, I think my non-compete was up October 1st or so. I joined like the 17th or something. You know, they had been working on the fall line and they're going out in January with the fall line, to market, which they had been working on. Like we're almost done with fall right now in June. So there were some holes in the line that, you know, October 17th or whatever it was, like we had to work fast. We basically had 2 months to get samples in to go to New York and fill in some holes.
Hmm.
But we did it because I did, and we really got, we got like a good little push off of that, because we had some different categories and things that these guys were going to expect to see. So I didn't have to wait all the way till the following spring season, which
Mm-hmm.
launched in July. We made some impact that first season, which was great. And some of my contacts overseas jumped through hoops because they're all looking for more customers. And these guys today are huge vendors of ours.
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting because I think probably in a way the size of the company helps with that too, because you can move a little quicker. You don't need as many
Yes.
approvals or as many hoops to jump through. Like you said, if there's a gap, fill it, move it, execute it. What was that process like? Like, did you feel like there was
Yeah,
less
we
tension
did.
there?
Yeah, they had to trust us, and they did. That was a great thing. But what happens in any of these businesses, as all of a sudden, like before we were selling specialty stores, trying to get into golf. Well, if you're going to sell golf, your left chest has to be open for the logo. You can't have
Yep.
a johnnie-O surfer dude on every golf shirt. So there were things like that we had to fix and move around. It wasn't because they were doing it wrong. They were doing everything right. It just, hey, we're getting ready to go get into this business. Now we've got 2,300 golf accounts, and we sell 2 million golf shirts a year. Things like that, I think, by the guy Marcus that works with me. We worked together at the previous life. We knew all that stuff because we'd been through it,
Yep.
and we help people every day, like people call and ask questions, if they're not like direct competition. And it just, there's a lot of, I call it ketchup and mustard. You want to put that stuff in your refrigerator once. You don't have to keep buying it every time you go to the
Yeah.
grocery store. So we knew all that stuff, and I think the learning curve was faster. And the management team and John, they trust us. And now we've got a tremendous bottoms business. We got swimwear business. We got knit shirts. We got layering. We got sport coats. We got shoe business. All that's not easy to do. Just
Hmm.
or came in here with a company that's struggling. They can't get anything out of the ground. Cool brand, but it isn't that easy. You got to have like the right product. You got to have the right financing. You got to have the right salespeople. Salespeople are huge. And then all of a sudden, like B2B got big. So you got to have the right internet people. We have some really smart
Mm.
people on our web. Then we got into collegiate licenses. Then that's a whole skill set. Now we're doing NFL. We brought in somebody that understands that. Marketing, influencers, all of that stuff today. I don't really get that involved with that, but that makes the business a lot more complicated.
No doubt. And to that point, like johnnie-O sits in a really interesting tension spot between like California casual with that East Coast structure. Like, how are you balancing those two different voices and like identities and cultures just to make sure that the brand doesn't lose its center?
That's a great question. Like we when we look at the line, we put it in buckets,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of people that buy johnnie-O that have never been on a golf course,
Yep.
and they may not even want anything performance. So we kind of break it out into buckets. We'll have like performance layering and then just regular layering that's not performance. We'll have a poolside collection that's kind of driven towards resorts and that lifestyle. We'll have coffee run, which is like, hey, this is
That's what I
what
got on.
you'd wear that. You may not have worked out today, but you put it on. It's super comfortable. You jump on an airplane. You work from home. You can run to your studio, whatever. And so we break it out like that. So when our reps go out or when we tell a message online, to direct to consumer, we know who we're trying to reach because we're telling that story based off of it. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yep.
And
Feels more curated to the customer. Yeah.
yeah, but people can cross over. Like I just got a bunch of cotton linen shorts. I'm going to Vegas tomorrow, for a golf event, and but I wanted some stuff to wear that wasn't so performance looking.
Hmm.
So that's what I like about our line. If you get a chance to go to one of our retail stores and you really see everything, you're like, wow. I mean, this is really cool. You can really, I can really fill my closet with this one brand.
Hmm. Something that I've also mentioned on the pod before, I think one of the greatest unknown influencers in fashion specifically, even in menswear, is not necessarily who you see on IG or like the next celebrity or whatever that's wearing specific brand, but it's actually like the buyer. Um, to your point, like when you're pitching the brand, how do you articulate that it's not just a performance line, like you had mentioned? Like there's texture, there's range, and the stories that you guys are trying to tell too.
Yeah, you can usually tell. Like that's great. You need to know your customer, right? And I think anything in sales, it's all about being on common ground and understanding it. But like if a buyer comes in and he's usually, say, he's in a bigger city and he's got a little higher end customer and he's selling very expensive tailored clothing, we would probably start the presentation out with Top Shelf, which
Hmm.
is our higher end stuff, and it's a little
Yep.
dressier. And because we realize, hey, there's a golf shirt you wear at the golf course, but then like this cutaway collar knit I'm wearing today, you can wear under a sport coat, and you just kind of got to know who you're speaking to. And those guys, again, those a lot of these stores that are selling $2,000 or $3,000 sport coats, their customer still likes value. They'll pay money for cars, watches, suits, all this stuff, homes. But when it comes to like sportswear, you know, once you get over a certain price point, it's really not any value there. Like
Hmm.
it's a cashmere sweater, $4,000. It's just a label at that point, or the brand is making it that expensive. You know,
Hmm.
because we use the best materials. We buy fabric from Laura Piana and we buy yarn from the best spinners, and but it doesn't mean it has to be crazy expensive.
Hmm.
There's other ways of bringing value to it to the market, and I call it like accessible luxury,
Yep.
and that really, if you go like into a men's store today, and this accessible luxury spot that we're in, we dominate more of the sportswear than what I call the gourmet sportswear. They'll
Hmm.
have some of that, but the guy that's really smart and is traveling and wearing this stuff, he loves the quality of our stuff. We've
Hmm.
proven that, hey, you go buy 4 pair of these pants, instead of 1 pair of those Italian pants,
Yep.
and that's kind of the magic,
Hmm.
over deliver.
Yeah, for sure. And it goes back to like recognition too. Like the logo speaks for itself. Like you're starting to build a lot of reputation in the space outside of golf.
Sure.
Um, and then to that point, like it's the brand has really exploded since you've come on. And it lives well outside of the golf course. Like, what did the brand feel like when you first started to where we are today?
Well, you know what it was just like the reason I was so attracted to it, like when you like the brand was so good because John had created this like white space, West Coast meets East Coast on a Venn diagram. So it's really easy to tell that story because you
Hmm.
walk into a store, I'm more retail driven at the time, and I wanted to go in all the best men's stores. Like, why am I going to buy this, Chris? Well, here's why. And you had to kind of explain how it worked, and it was just a little less precious, but it
Hmm.
wasn't so casual that it looked like, it looked like something your kids should be wearing.
Hmm.
And the one thing that we thought, and we all agreed to because we did it, is we didn't want to get logo fatigue. We didn't want the logo on the left chest of everything. We
Hmm.
wanted it on our iconic things, like the originals and things like that. And I think by doing that, even though that was a big deal at the time, it made the brand get more serious, like because like some grown men don't want to wear a logo shirt to
Yeah,
work every.
yeah.
Yep. So we started moving the logo around a little bit, like back neck on knits. We still offer knits with left chest, but we do a lot of that, so it's not right in your face. The wovens, the cut and sews. We started putting the logo on the tail. So and then because we knew how to design this stuff, we're able to go start just biting off big businesses in these categories: woven shirts, 5 pocket pants, performance knits. We kept doing what they were doing, which gave us the base, which was awesome. We just started adding, it's like a restaurant. They had 3 things on the menu, but then
Yeah.
they were all really great. We just started putting a few more things on the menu, and the folks, at the table wanted to eat it. And
Hmm.
but you kind of had to walk, before you ran on that stuff.
Hmm. Would you say that that was like your specialty spot, just being able to come in and articulate how to set up the
I think so.
categories in the
Yeah,
right way?
I'm a merchandiser,
Yep.
but I think I'm pretty good at it because I'm also a sales guy. And I think,
Hmm.
I go to the trade shows and listen to the customers, and I'll do truck shows and look at what they've got in the store. Like I'm not sitting in an office thinking I know everything.
Hmm.
We're going to Vegas tomorrow. I'll go in every store out there, for my wife and daughter even wake up from to
Yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
breakfast. That's just what I like to do, and I got 76,000 pictures on my computer of just product that from, the last you know, 25 years of stuff I've seen all over the world. So
Hmm.
when we get ready to design something, especially men's, it's not that much newness, right? So to go back and see a jacket that we looked at in Turkey back in 2004 is kind of cool, because it may be something about it that was really great, you know.
Hmm.
To me, I enjoy that part of it, and then I don't really have to go on sales calls like I used to, but I do like going on them and like, I like being in them just because I always learn something.
Yeah, those details are really important. Is there any place, knowing that your hub is in North Carolina, from like an inspiration standpoint, that has surprised you for like a moment of inspiration, whether it's where you're at now or anywhere you've traveled?
Like when you think about fashion, like around the world, you always think of Italy, right? And
Hmm.
Italy is great. They've got great fashion there. People dress great. But I started going to Istanbul, you know, back years ago, and I find that that's one of the most fascinating places I've ever been for fashion because it's more
Interesting.
of a melting pot. You get like the Italians kind of all dressed the same, and it's
Hmm.
beautiful. Everybody's wearing a brown tassel shoe and the navy blazer and a knit tie, blah blah blah. But like when you go to like a place like Istanbul, that's really it's the trading it's the trading capital of the world because of the way the Bosphorus Sea comes through there, and they got the world market. It's kind of cool to see it all, and they still have a lot of textiles being made there in factories where a lot of countries don't have that. You textiles are made one place, it's sewn somewhere else. So I really like that, and I like Portugal also. As far as out of the states, but then I think the Carolinas have always been a certain kind of fashion hub for like Ralph Lauren did a lot of his first specialty stores that really did well with the line were in the Southeast.
Hmm.
Like Southern, Southeastern people have always dressed. Charleston's a great town for that. Like you go to Charleston, there's like 5 great men's stores there. That's unusual,
Hmm.
but they still dress there, and that's unusual.
That's interesting. When, from like a performance perspective, is there any like new fabrics or constructions or materials like you're particularly excited about as you guys have continued to expand the portfolio?
Yeah, what's happening in performance is because it's technical, it just keeps getting better and better and better. So you got to make
Hmm.
sure you're looking where the stuff is being elevated. Because I could go to your closet and go, all right, here's 3 poly spandex shirts, and here's why they're different, even though they say they're the same thing.
Yep.
Like in natural fibers, like everything's great. Cashmere is like, good, better, best grade. Cotton, good,
Yep.
better, best. Merino wool, alpaca, all that stuff. When you get into performance fabrics, it all looks the same, right? It just says polyester spandex or polyester.
Hmm.
So what we've done, and this is a little bit of our magic, is we love dull finish yarns. We do not want anything to be shiny. Like I
Mm.
really don't think our customer wants to wear shiny clothes. So when you're looking at a knit shirt, and I got wearing one right now, like it looks like a cotton shirt, even though it's a poly spandex, and it
Hmm.
also feels like that, where it performs like you would expect. It wicks but it doesn't stick to you. Like I've been playing golf with my buddies and pat them on the back, great shot. I'm like, whoa, like the shirt sticks to their back. So and we're using 4-way stretch wherever we can. So like if a shirt only stretches this way, what happens when you move that way? Or
Hmm.
quarter zip. So 4-way stretch is a big deal, and using high end dull finish yarns and performance fabrics is a big deal for us. And like this whole warp knit, which is a newer thing where it's a different way of knitting. It's not done on a circular knitting machine, but it's kind of like if you cross woven and circular knitting, you get a product like warp knit. So it
Mm.
gives you 4-way stretch in some fabrics that are a little more sturdy. So we make a lot of bottoms out of that kind of stuff.
And that reminds me, the sport coat, the knitwear sport coat, the top shelf one. That like when I had hands on that, that was something that was super
That's cool.
memorable from a touch and feel. Yeah.
Yeah, and we kind of, I mean, like we really kind of invented the patterned knit sport coat. Like you go to the market and everybody had solid knit sport
Yep.
coats. Mills would take 2-color yarns and knit them up in different colors or solids or whatever. But what we did is we took a warp knit and put some texture in it and found like the perfect gray that you could print on. So then we designed the patterns that look like woven sport coats that
Hmm.
don't stretch and don't do this. And we print on that and make them. It's really cool. And really you see some like knit sport coats out there, but not many pattern ones. And they look just like wool or cashmere. And to me, that's probably the most unique product in this whole building, just because not everybody's got it. It's
It
really cool.
was it was crazy because I did a lot of sport coat fittings at Macy's in like the section that I worked in, and so there was a massive gap in time from
Yeah.
that period to when I touched that product for the first time. That was
Yeah.
like I just couldn't believe the way it felt like a hoodie, and I was like, "There's
Yeah.
just no way." And it's
But,
not like
but
you
it
said,
looks good.
it's not $1,000. It's what
No.
$420, something like
Yeah.
that, even less.
But it looks like $1,000 coat. And I tell you, a lot of my buddies, they support me and they buy our product at our retail store, and they're like only wearing those knit coats now because they're so comfortable. It's like, once you get used to wearing knitted fabric that stretches, you could put on something woven with no stretch. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa! This doesn't
Does it
feel
feel
like I
good?
want to wear it. I'm not going to be comfortable in this today. I mean, even the shoe I've got on is a knit upper,
Hmm.
and it's just comfortable. It just you're not having to break it in. It's comfortable the first time you put it on.
So with like streetwear and vintage is having kind of like another secondary moment. Obviously, like we talked about utility and where performance wear is at. Like all these different influences are bleeding into golf fashion, which has been really interesting these last couple of years. Like, are there any styles or subcultures outside of golf that you guys are pulling from now that you maybe haven't in past years?
Yeah, like for example, yes, now that we've got the customers got eyes on us, like we launched this lodge collection for this past fall, and really, you had some really cool quilted outerwear and all that in it, but it also has like these knitted plaid shirts that are overshirts in it and things like that are like, what do you wear if you're going to a cookout in the fall
Mm,
or a football game? So I'm not saying you're going to wear that to play golf in, but it wasn't meant to mate. And that's how we like dissect it. Like, like you're wearing coffee run today. You understand what that means. The lodge collection, there's a lot of people that they're not going to go to a golf course or somewhere like that to wear the golf nets. They dress more this way. I tell the stories like when I was in college, you know, it was all cars in the parking lot. And now you go to any of these schools, especially in the Southeast, it's all trucks. You know,
mhm.
the guys, people just are trying to live outside more and do more outside. And then we're not making like ski jackets that, I want you to go, this is your new ski jacket. But we make a lot of technical outerwear
Mhm.
that you can wear, but it's really comfortable. Also, you could play golf in it. You could go to an oyster roast. You could go shoot skeet. You could do whatever you wanted to in it. But in there, that's kind of what's happening in retail too with the malls. Like, everything's kind of going outdoor, right? And I think
Yep.
COVID probably made it even more like that. So, golf has exploded. And some of these brands that I noticed you on your podcast you've done, I think it's great for golf. All these brands that are a little more street driven or a little more fashion or, younger. That's been great for getting eyes on golf wear. You know,
Mhm.
it's really been great. And I noticed on your stuff you'd interviewed some of those guys. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it expands the idea of what golf fashion and like style can be. 'Cause to your point, like we came from different areas and interests, and now we've all kind of like intersected into this point in golf. And so we carry those interests into these different like activities and whatnot. If someone were to ask to name a piece that best represents who johnnie-O is now, that also is kind of dials into thinking around who Johnny is going to be in the future? Is there like a specific piece or even like a collection in mind that you would
Well,
point to?
something that just did really well for us, and I think it'd be hard for other brands to do it. Like we just relaunched the original shirt, in all
Mm,
cotton. And to me, John O'Donnell's idea, and I thought it was genius because, sometimes as merchandisers, we get so caught up in just oh, we sold a million of these. So we got to go sell more. But there was a customer out there that just wanted the all cotton original again. But it needed some marketing around it and to tell the story. And our marketing team did a great job. But what it did, it kind of it kind of revived a product that it was slowly dying off about the time I got here because everything was going, the market was going very performance at that time, back 2017, 18, whatever. So that's been fun to me to see that coming back, and not everybody can do that. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
the heritage or the history in doing that. And really, um, I still got some of those original shirts, they're great. And I just bought some of these new ones just to, if it's 95 degrees, I'm probably not playing golf in it in North Carolina, but I don't need to,
Yep.
wear it, going out to dinner or on the boat or to work or whatever. So there's a need for that. And we're aware of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've mentioned it a few times just in social, like how important having access to archives is, like what that unlocks from a brand perspective, because there is a lot of noise in this space, but because you guys have been around for 20 years, like you have a lot of stories that you can tap into and products too, to reintroduce all the newbies that have been showing up lately.
Yeah. And look, you miss stuff sometimes. Just like I'm looking in our design room right now, and there's 680 SKUs on the wall in there for next spring. It's a lot, and you tend to, and look, we're not a non-for-profit. Like we want to sell a lot of the stuff that people want, but it's easy sometimes as a brand to forget something that's low-hanging fruit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We got a tremendous marketing department, that's really come together in the last 6 months here or a year,
Mm-hmm.
like new people that came from other industries. We've always had a great team, but we beefed it up, I should say. So now, if we have an idea we all believe in, we know we can take it to market because we've got, you got to be able to do that today. Like you can't just have some great item and expect everybody to show up and find it. It just, we don't
Mm-hmm.
live in that world anymore, as you know. Like you got to be shouting it out and getting it in front of people's eyes, and then
Mm-hmm.
you've got a chance.
So you are walking into the old retail store where you used to work when you were 14. What order are you putting in with 14-year-old Chris?
It's actually funny. It kind of looks the same, actually.
Yeah.
And the guy that hired me, who's still one of my best friends, is still there. So,
Awesome.
um, yeah, but we do have a johnnie-O shop in there now, which is kind of cool. But I go there quite often because the guy that kind of trained me, and any article you've ever read about me, I give a lot of me loving the business. I mean, he literally, this guy, Steve Asher, I was walking home from a swimming pool, a little town pool when I was a kid, and couldn't see because I've been swimming with chlorine with my eyes open all day. And he gave me a ride home and dropped me off. He lived near me. I was like 12, and I kind of met him that way. And then I started shopping there when I was like 13 or 14, when I could wear, those size clothes. But then we just became best friends, and do all kinds of stuff together. But I just think like loving the business helps. Like I mean, it's kind of like a hobby to me,
Yep.
clothes. And like, even when if I'm on vacation, I might got a daughter that's in the business. My wife's a jewelry designer. Like we spend a lot of time in clothing stores, just all of us love it, and, I used to have a dog named Swatches, so
Oh, that's awesome.
I need to get another dog and name him Swatches. But that's just kind of like our hobby. It sounds crazy. And people that really love this business, that's usually how they are.
Hmm.
And our business in general is like a big fraternity. It's really, you would like it. I mean, I can just tell from your style, but like you should come to Chicago and go to that market and let me walk you around there. You would
Hmm.
find it fascinating. All these brands from all over the world are there, and it's cool. And it's from $5,000 sport coats down to $98 knit shirts, but it's really
Hmm.
well curated.
No, send me the dates. I'm definitely down. I would
It's
love to
early
do that.
August, yeah. And
Awesome.
I'll walk you around and introduce you to everybody. You'll love it. You probably get some
Let's
good content out of
Yeah, let's do it. And then the last question that I ask everybody on the way out, it goes, what's the story behind the one item in your closet you'll never get rid of? And what does that item mean to you?
it. Ooh, that's a great question. Um, I do have things like that I've never gotten rid of, and I'm trying to think. I do have like, like shoes for me, or like when you get a shoe that's right. I have a hard time parting with shoes. I keep my shoe
Mm.
trees in them and all of that, but like, this is going to sound crazy, but like, I think one of the best items in our line are our flip flops. And
Mm.
like,
Interesting.
and I'm a kind of a snob when it comes to that, but when we built them, kind of like we just launched sunglasses, we did it the same way. We took everything we liked in a pair of flip flops and we put it in there. The sole is not flat; it's cupped, or
Mm.
the inner sole, so that your heel doesn't slip out. You can break your ankle in a pair of flip flops when they get wet. The inside of it is siped, so it doesn't. It's just everything about those, and the sole's not too heavy. So every now and then, after you get a pair that's like 10 years old, the rubber will just dry out, and you got to get rid of them just because they just start to kind of get slippery on you. But our flip flops, if you don't have any of them, I think we call them sandals. They're unbelievable. I mean, they're really crazy good. And
Hmm.
buddies of mine that will not wear anything but ours just because they just have been proven they're that much better.
That's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
awesome. This has been uh, a crazy conversation again. You've had such an interesting journey. I'm so glad that we were able to link up. All right, that's a wrap for today's episode. If you're feeling the vibe, hit that subscribe button and drop us a quick review. It helps us keep the conversation going and growing. For more golf fashion, follow us over at Skratch and Golf Projects. We're always serving up style and stories that make this game what it is. And if you're hungry for even more, head over to Skratch.golf, where our collective stories live. Until next time, dress well and play fast. Peace.